Evening, folks. Welcome to the Leeds View podcast. This is the first of the two podcasts that we do each week. We also do daily Leeds United news from Monday to Friday, as well as a transfer talk wrap-up at the weekend. We're part of the Sports Social Podcasting Network, and we're partnered with OK Jersey for 15% off international shirts and international shirts only for this summer's World Cup if you use the code JER15 in your checkout basket. I hope you're all doing really well. It's a slightly different podcast for the next couple of weeks with holidays kicking in, and just generally there's not a huge amount of stuff to talk about outside of transfer rumours. We're covering that in the news, so there isn't really any major point in getting stuck into that in any more detail. So I'm going to do a couple of these on my own for a few weeks. We tend to do this pretty much at the end of every season anyway, or before the next season kicks in. But while we're in that holding pattern before the transfer stories start to kick in, which doesn't feel like it's too far away, the World Cup is obviously going to keep holding things up just a little bit. But we've got some stuff to talk about, some stuff that's outside of the normal news stuff that we cover, so Leeds adjacent topics, as well as giving you some of the latest information on the transfer stories that are floating around, because some of them are changing in the morning into the evening, and from the evening back into the morning. But I appreciate everyone joining me tonight. If you could stick a like on the video if you're watching it, and if you're listening on the audio platforms, if you could give us a channel review and follow us if you want to there as well. And again, apologies to people for the poor quality audio that went out last week in the back end of the week's podcast. We had major issues, and you'll have heard from the sound over the last week or so. It's still not perfect, but we're working to try and get it fixed. I have to wait for a new preamp to arrive to try and sort all that stuff out, because it blew. So there we go. Anyway, let's get into tonight's podcast and have a chat about what we're going to chat about. And there's a couple of topics. We're going to talk about the Shea Charles, Julian Brandt situation more so than anything else. Harry Wilson is still floating around, but Fenerbahce believe that they can get him now as well. Fulham, of all the clubs, appear to be out of the mix when it comes to Harry Wilson, which is a bit of a surprise. So that's floating around the ether. There was no surprise announcements today based on the X platform rumours of what was floating around, but that's Harry Wilson. There's two others to talk about. We are going to talk about the full goalkeeper situation and some comments that have been made about that, as well as what's floating around the ether on that. Pablo Hernandez, some news on him as well. Sam Greenwood, a name from the past. We are going to touch on Sam Greenwood as well. And then towards the back end, we'll try and go through the Premier League adoption of some of the World Cup rules and what your favourite rule changes. Jesus, we're in that part of the season where it's what's your favourite rule change? But you know what I mean. There are some rules that have been implemented in the World Cup that have looked pretty good, and some that are less so. So we'll get into that in more detail. But if you've got any rules you'd like to see the Premier League adopt, let me know in the comments. And adoption's not the issue with the Premier League, is it? Its implementation has always been the problem with the Premier League. But we'll start off and we'll talk about Shea Charles, because this is still the most significant story of the summer window so far. I suppose it means significant in as far as Leeds United put a transfer offer in for the player. So that's where it is. There's an offer gone in. It was 20 million. We spoke in the news today. It was rejected. There's been a little bit of a player update on this as the day has gone on today, but it is the most significant development. And I wanted to get into some of your comments that have been on the channel over the last week or so about the Shea Charles situation since it first popped up. Leeds a £20 million offer put in for the player. It was rejected. However, all of the verbiage and noise coming out of the journalists that would know far more than we would are all saying the same thing. Positive vibes from around both camps, which would suggest they're not a million miles away when it comes to getting a deal done here. Some people believe 25, some people believe 22, 23. Obviously, Southampton wants slightly more than Leeds will want to pay. There is that sneaky option floating around, not fully confirmed, but that's been rumoured to be there as well. So it's an interesting one. It does feel like it will probably get done. Leeds haven't walked away, and usually when Leeds put down like an offer they believe is valid for a player, if it isn't accepted, Leeds tend to walk away straight away, and they haven't in this situation. The news that's come out tonight that's interesting is apparently the player has told his representatives he wants to move to Leeds. So that's positive. He'd been in Yorkshire before with Sheffield Wednesday, but that's a positive move. He sees Leeds as the next step in his career. Obviously, Leeds are building something on the pitch as well as off the pitch, and he can see that, and he wants to be part of that. So from a player perspective, he wants to come to Leeds. At least that's what's being communicated in the press right now this evening. From a Leeds perspective, they clearly want him. And from a Southampton perspective, they clearly want to get as much money as they can possibly get in for him. So that's where the land lies on Shea Charles. Now, the questions that have come up is £20 million... Well, it's not going to be 20 million. It's going to be more than 20 million. Is that too much? Is it? And I suppose that's a relative term, isn't it? You're talking about a modern transfer market, and you're talking about central midfielders, and how much is a central midfielder worth in general. And then you add to it, well, how much is a homegrown English or British central midfielder worth in today's market who's coming from an English club? So you got to add all that tax on as well. And this is why Leeds, I think, historically have been shopping on the continent and looking at the German market, because they've got better deals there. Shea Charles has that UK tax on it, which brings it over £20 million mark. And then you add to that, the season that Leeds missed out on promotion was huge for them, because you saw Jorginho Rutter, Archie Gray and Chris Somerville all leave, and they all went for over 20 million quid. So you look at that and you go, Shea Charles, yeah, one of Southampton's best players last season, definitely one of their best players in the second half of the season when they went on that really positive run after he gotten over his injury. So by that logic, 22 years of age, high ceiling, maybe it's about right. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it, because the other question is, do we need him? And that again is a relative question, depending on do you like the midfield we've got right now? The obvious one here is he's either competition for Ethan Ampadu, or he's a replacement for Ilya Grove, or maybe a bit of both. And I don't know if that's really needed right now. The more likely option here is there's other clubs sniffing around and Leeds see him as a player they want. Grove's got 1 year left on his deal. He's younger, he's taller, he's more physical, he's probably more mobile, and that's not to take away from Ilya Grove. Most people know how I feel about Ilya Grove. I quite like the player. I see what he does for Leeds and I get it. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea. But Shea Charles is probably a younger, more athletic version of it. Can do box-to-box stuff as well. So he does add areas in that midfield I don't think we have right now. And what he does have in his locker, which we don't see enough of outside of Sean Longstaff, is a shot from distance and a willingness to put his laces through a ball when he gets a half a chance. So there's something in there. It does look like the one that Leeds are going to go for. The big question that did come through this week is he overrated? I don't know. Maybe not. Again, 22 years of age. He's had a lot of football. And if you go back to his time at Manchester City, he was 19 at Manchester City when they made him the under-23s captain. So clearly they saw something in him even then. Obviously, he doesn't stay there, but he's a very ambitious kid. He seems to want to get to the Premier League and back up to the top end of the Premier League as quickly as he possibly can in his career. So it's an interesting one. Anyone who knows football seems to rate him quite highly. I haven't watched enough of Shea Charles to do that, and I probably should keep him more close to Northern Ireland. But when I have asked people who I know from the north about Shea Charles, they've all said he's excellent when he plays for Northern Ireland. So, but again, international football can be weird. Remember David Healy, phenomenal for Northern Ireland, didn't always do it for our club football. So it can be a relative one as well. But yeah, that's the story. I'm going to stop saying relevant, but that's the story right now when it comes to Shea Charles. Likely to rumble on for the rest of the week, I would imagine. I don't think there's any rush to get it done and dusted straight away. The Harry Wilson one, by the way, apparently Harry Wilson's on holidays right now, so unless he's flying in from Torremolinos or wherever he is, he's not expected to be done anytime soon either. And again, his contract doesn't technically expire until the first of the month, so we'll see on him. Julian Brandt's the next one, and this one's interesting because it does feel very much like an ambitious move for Leeds. I won't spend a huge amount of time on this one, but it's this looks like a really tough one to do. There's a huge amount of competition. We're talking about that club from Turkey. Atletico Madrid are involved in it. He wants to go to Atletico Madrid. His wife has a place in Spain. His agents, Italian and Roma, are having a sniff around. It does feel like a really tough... And all the noise, again, is that this is going to be a really tough deal for Leeds to be able to get done. Someone asked me earlier on today, is he another Igor Paixão? And no, I don't think he is another Igor Paixão. All the noise last summer from all of the reports and how much Leeds talked about Paixão last year seemed like Leeds thought that was done and dusted and everything had been agreed personally and there wasn't going to be an issue. It was just a matter of tidying up the transfer fee. And then Marseille came in and a couple of dodgy stuff happened behind the scenes apparently, and off he went to Marseille instead. Took him a while to get going there. Had a pretty strong back end of the season there. But apparently he's moving on again this summer. So is it the same as Igor Paixão? No, I don't think it is, because Julian Brandt, we know the clubs that are interested in him, and Leeds are not the favourites to get him by any stretch of the imagination at all. Atletico are the odds-on favourite to get him. And it'll be interesting to see what he wants to do. This has got to be an ambitious move for Leeds versus a realistic move for Leeds, I think. Other people have basically said, is he that good? Is it work on for Julian Brandt? He's 30 years of age. And then at the same breath, people want another Pablo Hernandez, who didn't join Leeds until he was 32 years of age. And the bulk of his football with Leeds was played in the Championship, So is he? He's one of the best attacking midfielders in the German Bundesliga for the last decade. And he has been Very much relied on by Borussia Dortmund. He's played a ton of Champions League football. He's got caps for the national side. Yeah. And I think if you can get him for nothing, why not? Why not? It definitely raises the floor of the squad, if nothing else. He doesn't play every week for Dortmund, so he's not going to play every week for Leeds either. But he does give you options there. But again, I feel like this is an ambitious move rather than a realistic move. And the other part of this is we appear to have one of these in our locker every single transfer window. We go for a player you think it's a bit of a stretch and you have a crack at it. Now, in saying that, we did get Dominic Calvert-Lewin last summer. And he had European interest in him as well. So I think it's a slight bit different when you're talking about a guy that grew up in Yorkshire coming to Leeds versus a guy that's been playing his football in Germany, coming to Leeds as well. Is Dortmund twinned with Leeds? Have I seen that somewhere? Am I imagining it? Someone will let me know. I don't know. The next one talk about the goalkeeper situation, and this is a wider talking point because there's moving parts to this, but it is interesting. And the goalkeeper, Zion Suzuki, has been linked with Leeds United. And it's worth getting into this a little bit and looking at who he is, what he's actually capable of outside of a World Cup, because we're doing that thing that everyone's told not to do. Don't judge a player by a World Cup. And here we are looking at a keeper who's had a very good World Cup so far, thinking, yeah, we might have him. He'd be decent. There's also the sliding doors on this as well. What's the story with Lucas Perry and what's the story with Karl Darlow? So from a Zion Suzuki perspective, we look at his XGOT, which is the goalkeeping equivalent of XG, not just for this year, but for last year as well, and the year before versus the Leeds keepers, to try and round off a talking point that's worth covering on that. The World Cup, the World Cup sentimentality that kicks it every time there's a World Cup is form at Parma and what the media in Italy are saying about him. And then Karl Darlow's situation, because there's a lot of reports that Karl Darlow's gone. He's going to leave Leeds at the end of this month. It's not from the most credible of sources that's out there, but there's more noise around him being gone than there is around him being staying. He's probably taking his holiday time anyway to at least consider what options he's got on the table. All we know is that Manchester United were interested in him and so were Leeds. Spurs seem to move away from this, looking at other options there. So there is still that to get sorted out. And then there's the Lucas Perry side on top of this as well. What happens with Lucas Perry? Because the reason I don't think Zion Suzuki will happen is because of the price tag and because of the language that's being used around that as well. It's a huge budget question. If Leeds have got a limited budget this summer, are you giving Parma their asking price of 35 to 40 million quid? I don't think you are. Unless you're selling Lucas Perry for a decent chunk of change and you can offset some of that cost and kind of bring it down to, a net 16 million, 70 million. Maybe then it's worth it. But that would depend. It would depend on the Karl Darlow situation and Leeds needing a keeper and Perry leaving the club situation. It's a huge amount of money. Aston Villa currently in Italy are labelled as the outright favourites to get him. They're looking at a replacement for Emi Martinez. And it does feel like they would pay that kind of money for a goalkeeper. But he's very young. He's 23 years of age. Gary McAllister doesn't believe Leeds United need to look at a goalkeeper at all. He was talking to the YP this week and he's basically just said, I don't see any reason why Leeds will be looking at a goalkeeper. Get Karl Darlow locked down and you're fine in that goalkeeping department. And that's where we get into the XGOT stuff and point that out. Before Lucas Perry joined Leeds United, his last season at Lyon in France, his XGOT, the goalkeeping equivalent of XG, how many goals you've conceded versus the quality of shots that you have faced, was plus 605, which means that he had stopped 6 more goals than he should have. So basically, the net at the end of the season, there were 6 balls that should have been goals that weren't. And there's that. And that's a huge positive to look at when you're looking at a goalkeeper. This season, it was minus 2.05, which means he's conceded 2 more than he should. All the Leeds keepers were in the negative 1.15 and negative 1.5. So you look at those 3. His is interesting. Suzuki's is interesting. At Parma last season, he was in negative 1.36, which is not the worst at all by any stretch of the imagination. Season before was minus 0.99. He played 37 games that season. That's decent. But the year before that, when he made his move to Parma from the Japanese Pro League, he had a plus 4 XGOT, which shows that you could have a very strong season in one league and then move to another league and it not be a success straight away for you. He's built up his time, but Parma rate him very highly and they're hoping for a bidding war, which is why I don't think Leeds will be involved in this situation at all. The journalists in Italy have basically said last season he did everything he could do for Parma. You look at his XGOT, don't take that into consideration. The keeper had a very good season. There was nothing else he could have done last year for Parma. The fans see his next move as a big step away from the club, so they're looking at a top side within the European top 5 leagues, specifically a move to the Premier League, which is why they believe Aston Villa looks like the more likely destination with Champions League football. And they reckon that that's what he's going to go for. And as I say, Parma want the bidding war, and that just me just take Leeds out of the equation there. If it's already an asking price of 35 million quid, and then you're going, oh, well, it's a bid more, that's your starting price. Forget about it. So, yeah, I don't know if I buy it. I don't know if I buy the sources it's coming from either. It came from an Italian journalist initially. We know the history we've had with Italian journalists going back to last summer. So, there is that. So, that's all your transfer kind of stories bundled up in 15 minutes. There you go. The rest of this is just giving you some updates on some other news. So, Pablo Hernandez, which is nice to see. He did a cracking job last season at Castellon when he came in and took over. Got them into the playoff to get into La Liga. Unfortunately, they lost in the playoff final to Almeria. So they will stay where they are for next season. But he has been rewarded with a brand new contract until 2029. And there is an option to extend that deal for a further year. He's talked about it being an honour to stay at his club, his hometown club. He has thanked the president of the club, who said that he's a role model to everybody around the place, and just a really nice story. And again, going back, remember when Leeds signed him, 32 years of age, so let's not write off the older lads just yet. Some of them have been very, very good into their later 30s. But yeah, serious impact on Castellon. It's a lovely story. It's great to see him being recognised and getting a new deal. One to keep an eye on for maybe a future manager down the road for Leeds in a couple of years' time. We'll see how he gets on. But he's been brilliant. He did a great job there, playing lovely football, scoring plenty of goals. Good job. The next one to chat about is an odd story that kind of popped back up again. But I thought we'd just box it off because he might be back in England very soon. It's Sam Greenwood. I always liked Sam Greenwood. I always thought there was a talented player in there. I thought he had all the attributes to be a top-end footballer. There was just always something missing. He would start all of his seasons at every club he went to really, really strongly, and he'd be talking about the option to buy in the deal of why did we put such a low price in, and by the end of the season he'd have gone off the boil and we're back at Leeds United. Well, last season he left Leeds and he went to, excuse my pronunciation on this now, Pogoń Szczecin. I'm really sorry about the pronunciation. That Polish side went there last year. It wasn't what you'd classify as an amazing season. He scored 3 goals, got 12 assists. He started 16 games, played 20 overall. He has been heavily linked with a move back to England this summer to Blackburn Rovers in the Championship. I think Tony Mowbray's taken them over as well. Had a couple of unsuccessful loans at Borough and Preston. Both of them started off really strongly. Got a bag of goals and assists early on. Then it just dries up after Christmas for him, as tended to be the case. But it's an interesting one to see if he does come back. He's still only 24 years of age, so he still has time. But you look at on paper and go, he went to the Polish league and it's not a massive output for a number 10 or a wide player, as he did play at times for them this season, whatever season we're in right now. You know what I mean. Until we get to the training, the players are back in training. I'm not going to be saying this season. Right, the next and last piece to have a chat about is the rule adoption for the Premier League, and why this is interesting, because the Premier League have made an announcement that basically the rule where you get a red card for putting your hand over your mouth in a confrontational situation, which is the caveat to that rule, won't be adopted by the Premier League next season. So if you do that in the Premier League, you're fine. You can abuse anyone all you want as long as your hand is over your mouth. No one's going to say a word to you. The other ones, there's no real major news on whether the other rules that have been run at the World Cup this summer are going to be adopted at all. And there's a couple that I'd like to... I wasn't keen on VAR getting involved in overturning corners. But seeing how fast it's been done at the World Cup, I'm not against it anymore. My issue is, and will always be, that's what it looks like at an international tournament. VAR at an international tournament, more often than not, is pretty quick and is pretty decent. It's the implementation when the Premier League get their hands on it, which is always the worry. So I don't know if I'm confident they will be that quick at overturning them, or whether we'd have to wait 3.5 minutes. If that's the case, you don't want to see it. The time wasting ones have been brilliant as well. Players have got off the pitch relatively quickly, and there's no dragging of people in the penalty area, because the rule changed there as well, that a free kick or penalty can be given for an offence before the ball comes into play, which Arsenal capitalised on the vagueness around that rule last year in the Premier League to just drag out the players before the ball came in. And what you've seen in the World Cup is a lot more competitive corner kicks coming into the box. People aren't able to grab onto each other. There's a lot more scrutiny on it. And it's been good to see that. I'd love to see that in the Premier League last season. Just take all these dark art tactics, as everyone labels them, out of football. But it's an interesting one. I don't know if they're going to adopt that either. The speed of VAR as well. It's outside of a couple of games. It was the Uruguay match last night was a little bit slow. But in general, it's been pretty quick. And the hydration breaks, no one wants to see them. We know what you're doing. We know what they are. No point getting into it. UEFA have used this entire World Cup to score points against FIFA. And I'm convinced it's because of the two presidents. But every time FIFA make a mistake, like the Somali referee not getting into the country, what happens? UEFA appoint him to the Super League final. Didn't have to. He's not a UEFA referee, but they did. And now you look at the hydration breaks. UEFA have made an announcement that they won't be adopting this for the Euros, and you won't be seeing this coming into European football, which makes sense, and it's great to see that. So yeah, there's a couple of other ones. There's a time waste one we've already talked about. We've not seen massive issues this World Cup. I'd love to know what people think of the World Cup rules that you've seen so far, or the implementation of the rules. Do you have any faith in the Premier League to implement these correctly? I still don't think they've implemented the offside correctly yet, but that's a different conversation. And are there any rules you'd like to see the Premier League actually adopt? I'm laughing because you can just see it being a mess as soon as they get hold of it. And again, you go back, I think it was 2 years ago, the Premier League were offered, FIFA offered them their systems to run for VAR and everything else, and they said, no, we're fine, we'll crack on with our own ones, which has been a disaster for the most part. So yeah, it's an interesting one as well to keep an eye on. Let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts on the summer transfer business so far, or at least what we've got 3 concrete moves on the table right now. Nothing on exits. It's been very quiet on the exits, so interesting one to keep an eye on there as well. But yeah, I reckon that one's going to heat up pretty quickly as well. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'll wrap it up there. Massive thanks for joining me this evening. If you want to stick a like on the video on YouTube, you can. If you want to check out our affiliate links down below, you can. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, if you want to give us a follow and a channel rating, massively appreciate. Have a great rest of your evening. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning for more Leeds news, and we'll see where we are then. Mind yourself. Bye.